tittle after 20 years caring for my paralyzed husband. For 2 decades, I carried his weight, literally and emotionally. But when the truth came out, I realized the man I sacrificed everything for had been living a second life without me. For 20 years, Claire devoted her life to caring for her husband, Michael, after a tragic accident left him paralyzed. She gave up her dreams, distanced herself from friends, and turned her home into a place of constant care. But as their 20th anniversary approached, Claire stumbled upon a hidden box in the attic, filled with letters, photographs, and secrets. That made her question everything she thought she knew about her marriage. What follows is a journey of heartbreak, betrayal, and an unexpected second chance at love and freedom. The night that changed everything, it was October 17th, 2005, when my life split into before and after. The phone rang at 2:14 a.m. The kind of ring that never carries good news, Mrs. Andrews. A man's voice said, clipped but urgent. Your husband has been in a car accident. He's alive, but you need to come to St. Mary's Hospital immediately. The drive. There was a blur. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out at the wheel. The streets were empty, my headlights cutting through the cold autumn fog. I kept telling myself he'd be fine. Maybe a broken arm, maybe a concussion. Not life-changing. When I walked into the A, the smell of antiseptic hit me first, followed by the sound of beeping monitors and hurried footsteps. A nurse led me to a curtained room. And there he was, Michael, pale, bruised, tubes running from his arms. His eyes were open but distant, as though he was looking through me. A doctor stood beside him, flipping through a chart. Mrs. Andrews, your husband has a spinal cord injury. He's paralyzed from the waist down. We're still assessing, but the damage is likely permanent. The word permanent lodged itself in my chest like a shard of glass. Michael's hand reached for mine, trembling. Claire, he whispered, don't leave me. I didn't think. I just leaned forward, kissed his forehead, and promised, I'm not going anywhere. At the time, I meant it with every fiber of my being, a vow tested the first months after Michael's accident were a crash course in survival. Our world shrank to a cycle of hospital rooms, physical therapy sessions, and long nights where neither of us could sleep. We sold his truck, cashed out our savings, and remodeled the house. Ramps instead of stairs, wide doorways for the wheelchair, grab bars in every room. I learned how to operate the Hoyer lift to move him from bed to chair. I learned how to change his catheter, clean bed sores, and inject medications. I learned how to smile when I wanted to cry. Friends visited at first. They brought casseroles, flowers, and promises to be there for anything we needed. But people have their own lives. Within a year, visits were rare. Invitations to dinners or parties stopped coming. I told myself it didn't matter. I had a purpose now, and that purpose was Michael. We had been married for 5 years before the accident, and back then, our marriage was normal. We argued over bills, laughed over bad movies, made love on lazy Sunday mornings. But after the accident, intimacy became complicated, not just physically, emotionally. Michael quieter, moodier. He snapped over small things. Some days he wouldn't speak to me at all. One evening, about 2 years after the accident, I sat beside him at dinner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, his favorite. He pushed the plate away. Not hungry, he muttered. You barely ate lunch. I said gently. He glared at me. Stop hovering. I'm not a child. I bit my tongue, cleared the plate, and went into the kitchen. Standing at the sink, I stared out the window at the dark yard. My reflection in the glass looked older than 32, tired, hollow-eyed. That night, after he was asleep, I sat on the edge of the bed and reminded myself of the vow I'd made in the I'm not going anywhere. Didn't realize then how much that promise would cost me. The loneliness no one sees, By the 5th year, my life had become a well-oiled machine. Up at 6 a.m., meds at 6:30, breakfast by 7, morning exercises, laundry, phone calls to insurance, and cooking meals soft enough for Michael's bad teeth, but hearty enough for him to feel full. I didn't think about my needs anymore. I didn't buy new clothes unless mine were falling apart. I stopped wearing makeup. The woman in our wedding photos, bright smile, shiny brown hair, felt like someone I used to know, not me. Every so often, I'd find myself talking to the walls. It sounds crazy, but when you spend entire days in near silence, you start needing to hear your own voice. Michael's mood had its cycles. Some weeks he was pleasant, even grateful. Other weeks, he was a storm cloud. During one of those dark stretches, I walked into the bedroom to find him turned away from me, his phone clutched tight in his hand. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. "No one, just reading." He slid the phone under the blanket. I didn't think much of it then, but something in the way he wouldn't meet my eyes stayed with me. Around that time, I started dreaming more vividly. In my dreams, I was walking barefoot along a beach at sunset. The air was warm. My hands were free. There was no chair, no meds, no constant watchfulness, just the sound of waves and my own heartbeat. One morning, as I helped Michael shave, I caught him smiling, not at me, but at something in his head. "What's funny?" I asked. "Nothing. You wouldn't understand." It was such a small moment. But later, I'd think back to that smirk and realize it was one of the first cracks in the wall between us, and I hadn't even noticed it was there. The anniversary, gift our 20th wedding anniversary, should have felt like an achievement. 20 years of marriage, 17 of them in the shadow of his paralysis. Most couples don't survive half that kind of strain. I made a small dinner, roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, lemon pie. I even put on a dress I hadn't worn in years. Michael didn't say much through the meal, but he seemed in a decent mood, which was rare lately. After dessert, he cleared his throat. "There's something I want you to get for me," he said. "Sure, what is it?" "In the attic, black box, wooden lid, you'll see it." I hadn't been up there in years. The attic ladder creaked as I climbed. The air smelled of dust and cedar. My flashlight beam swept over boxes of old Christmas decorations, stacks of photo albums, and suitcases we hadn't used since the accident. Then I saw it, tucked in the far corner under an old quilt. A black wooden box with a brass clasp. I knelt and brushed off the dust. It was heavier than I expected. When I unlatched the lid creaked open, revealing neat stacks of envelopes tied with ribbon. Curiosity got the better of me. The first envelope had Michael written in looping handwriting I didn't recognize. I slid out the letter. "My love, I still dream of you every night. I wish I could be there the way I want to, but our time will come." My breath caught. The signature was just an initial. I set it aside, my hand shaking, and opened another. "She will never understand us. I'm sorry you're trapped there, but remember, you're mine in all the ways that matter." The air felt suddenly colder. I flipped through more letters. Some were dated as recently as 2 years ago. At the bottom of the box was a small stack of photographs. Michael in a park. Michael smiling in a restaurant. And in almost every photo, there was the same woman, blonde hair, green eyes, and a boy of about 10 with Michael's exact smile. I sat back on my heels, heart pounding, so hard I could hear it in my ears. From downstairs, Michael called out, "Did you find it?" I stared at the box, at the evidence of a life I didn't know existed. And for the first time in 20 years, I didn't know if I could keep my promise. The letters I sat in the attic for what felt like hours, the flashlight trembling in my grip. Every letter I pulled from the box was another nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. They weren't just love notes. They were records of a relationship. One letter dated in 2008, 3 years after the accident. The way you hold me makes me forget everything. I wish I could sleep beside you every night, not just when she's away visiting her sister. The boy keeps asking about you. He calls you daddy now. It makes me so happy. I read that one twice, my vision blurring with tears. Visiting my sister, I'd only done that twice since Michael's accident. Both times for a single weekend. Convinced I was abandoning him by leaving Dawn another letter. Don't let her guilt you into anything. She's only there because she feels she has to be. You deserve to be loved, not pitied. The woman's words twisted in my chest like a knife. Pity? Is that what he thought I'd given him all these years? I spread the photographs out on the attic floor. Michael looked healthier in them than he had in years. No dark circles under his eyes, no sallow skin. The boy's arm was looped around his shoulder in some shots. In others, the woman leaned in close, laughing, her hand resting lightly on his. I was shaking so badly that the edges of the photos bent in my fingers. From below, his voice floated up again. Claire, what's taking so long? I shoved the letters and photos back into the box, closed it, and took a deep breath before climbing down. When I reached the living room, I set the box on his lap. Here, I said. My voice was steady, but it felt like a mask. His eyes flicked to mine for half a second, then to the box. Thanks. He didn't ask if I'd opened it. Didn't try to hide it from me. He just rolled away toward the bedroom without another word. It was that. Silence, that lack of surprise, that told me everything I needed to know. The photographs that night, I didn't sleep. Michael dozed off early, but I lay awake, my mind replaying the images in the photographs over and over. The boy's age was the first thing that struck me. In the most recent pictures, he looked around 10, maybe 11, which meant he'd been born well after the accident. After the wheelchair. After I'd already devoted my life to caring for him, I crept into the living room around midnight, flicking on the lamp. I'd kept one photograph in my pocket, one I couldn't bring myself to give back. Michael was in a park, sitting in his chair under a canopy of golden leaves. The woman stood behind him, hands on his shoulders, her hair catching the sunlight. The boy was kneeling beside them, holding an ice cream cone. Michael was smiling. Not the forced smile he gave when neighbors stopped by or when I brought him his favorite dessert. This was real. The kind of smile I hadn't seen on his face in over a decade. The dates on the back of the photographs told their own story. 2012, 2015, 2019, and the latest just a year ago. I thought back to those dates. In 2012, I'd been working part-time at the library to help cover medical bills. I trusted him to be home alone during my shifts. In 2015, I'd spent a week in Chicago helping my sister after her surgery. In 2019, well, that was the year I'd gotten pneumonia and been hospitalized for 3 days. He hadn't just found companionship. He'd built a second life. The next morning, as I helped him dress, my hands moved mechanically, buttoning his shirt, straightening his collar, but inside my thoughts were anything but calm. Claire, he said suddenly about last night. I froze. Yes? He paused, eyes narrowing slightly. Never mind, that was it. No explanation, no lie. Not even the courtesy of pretending. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He didn't think I'd leave. He thought my promise in that hospital room was a life sentence, a timeline that doesn't feed you waited until after lunch, when the house was quiet and Michael was settled in his chair by the window. He was reading, or at least pretending to, the same worn paperback he'd had on the side table for weeks. Michael, I said, standing just behind him, we need to talk about the box. His shoulders stiffened. What about it? I opened it. My voice didn't shake, though my heart was pounding. I read the letters. I saw the photos. He closed the book, turning it face down on his lap. Then you already know. That was it, no denial. No, you've got it wrong. Just those 4 words. I stepped closer. The boy, how old is he? Michael's jaw worked like he was grinding his teeth. 11, my stomach twisted. So he was born in 2012, 7 years after the accident. After I broke off, my voice cracking. After I'd already given up everything for you. His eyes flicked toward me, cold and almost defiant. You didn't give up everything, Claire. You still had your sister. You still went out sometimes. I was stuck here. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Stuck here. I was here. Every day. Every night. I was your nurse, your wife, I stopped myself before I said the word prison guard, but we both knew it was hovering in the air. She made me feel like a man again, he said flatly. Not a patient. Not a burden. Just me. I couldn't speak. He went on almost casually. She was a nurse at the rehab center. We kept in touch. She understood me in ways you didn't. The words hit harder than any slap. And the boy? I asked, though I already knew. My son, he said simply. She raised him on her own. I helped when I could. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with the one I'd married, the one I'd carried through 20 years of pain. And for the first time, I wondered if the accident had truly taken everything from him, or if I had been the one losing more all along. The confrontation, I gripped the back of his wheelchair so tightly my knuckles ached. Do you have any idea what those years cost me? I said, my voice low but trembling. Michael didn't look up. Me. He just stared out the window at the bare branches swaying in the wind. I missed weddings, birthdays, my father's funeral, I said. Because I wouldn't leave you alone. Because I thought you needed me. I did, he said. But not like that. I almost laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Not like that. Michael, I lifted you out of bed every morning. I bathed you. I cleaned you when you were too sick to move. I fought with insurance companies. You smothered me, he said suddenly, turning his head toward me. His eyes were hard, almost angry. Every moment of my life was scheduled, managed, controlled. With her, I could breathe. Her, the nameless owl. Do you love her? I asked, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. His pause was long enough to answer before he opened his mouth. I did. Maybe I still do, but she's gone. Moved. Away years ago. You're the one here now. It was like he was telling me I'd won a consolation prize, him. And the boy? I asked. He's fine, doing well. I send money when I can. Money? From where? Our joint account? The savings I thought were for medical expenses. How much? I asked. He didn't answer. That told me everything. I stepped back, my hands slipping from the wheelchair. The room felt too small, the air too thin. Claire, he started, but I cut him off. Don't. You've said enough. I walked into the kitchen, my vision tunneling. I wanted to scream, to throw every dish in the cupboard against the wall. Instead, I stood there, hands gripping the edge of the counter, breathing in and out until my pulse slowed. In that moment, something inside me shifted. For 20 years, I'd built my life around him. Now, I started to wonder if I could build a life without him. 20 years of lies. The next morning, I found Michael already awake, sitting in the living room with the box open on his lap. The letters were spread out on the coffee table like some grotesque scrapbook. You want to hear it? He asked without looking up. All of it? I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Go ahead. He ran a hand over his face. After the accident, I didn't think you'd stay. No one would blame you if you left. But you didn't. You made sure I had everything I needed, except myself. I felt like I disappeared into the chair, into the routine, into you. I bit back a retort. At rehab, he continued, she was different. She didn't pity me. She joked with me, teased me, made me feel he stopped searching for the word normal. Like a man. You were a man, I said sharply. You were my husband. He shook his head. I was your patient. And when she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I didn't know how to tell you. I told myself it was a mistake, that I could be in both worlds. That you'd never know. You managed that pretty well, I said bitterly. I thought if I could keep you happy, I could keep the life we had and still have that part of me with her. His voice softened. I wasn't trying to hurt you, Claire. I was trying to survive. As if the years I spent hauling him in and out of bed, lifting him into the shower, rubbing feeling back into his legs on freezing winter mornings, as if that wasn't survival. I looked at him then, really looked. His face was older, lined with pain and time. But in his eyes, I didn't see regret. I saw a man who still thought what he'd done was justified. You're not the only one who's been surviving. Michael, I said quietly, the difference is I didn't betray you to do it. I turned and walked out, leaving him with his letters and the life he'd chosen to keep in the shadows. That was the day I stopped wearing my wedding ring. The breaking point 3 days passed without another word between us about the letters. I went through the motions, breakfast, meds, laundry, but something in me had gone cold. I wasn't doing it out of love anymore. I was doing it because it was the cleanest way to keep the peace until I figured out my next move. The turning point came on a Thursday afternoon. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when Michael's phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wouldn't have touched it before, but now my hands moved without hesitation. The message was from a contact saved as Lydia. Lydia, got the check. Thank you. He's starting soccer this weekend. Wish you could see him. A second message came in before I could breathe. Lydia, he asked if you'd be there for his birthday. I didn't know what to say. I stared at the screen. My jaw locked so tight it hurt. So it wasn't just the past. He was still in contact, still sending money, still holding a piece of himself away from me. When Michael called from the living room, asking for help reaching something, I walked out with the phone still in my hand. Who's Lydia? I asked, my voice sharp. He blinked. You went through my phone? I asked you a question. His lips pressed into a thin line. You already know. That was it. No explanation, no apology. Something inside me snapped. I turned, walked back into the bedroom, and pulled out the old duffel bag from the closet. I started packing. Not much, just enough to leave fast when the time came. My passport. A few clothes. The envelope of cash I'd kept hidden for emergencies. For years, I'd told myself leaving wasn't an option. That I owed him my loyalty. That walking away would make me a monster, but monsters don't bleed themselves dry for 20 years. Monsters don't lose themselves in someone else's shadow. When I zipped the bag, it was like hearing the click of a lock opening inside my chest. I wasn't free yet, but I was on my way. The escape planet had been almost 3 years since I'd spoken to my sister, Karen, not because of any real fight. Life had just gotten busy and I'd stopped returning her calls. Always too tired or too busy with Michael to keep the connection alive. Now, standing in the kitchen with my duffel hidden in the bedroom, I stared at her name on my phone for a long minute before pressing call. Claire. Her voice carried surprise, but also warmth. Wow, it's been a while. I swallowed. I need your help. There was a pause. Are you okay? No, I said honestly, but I'm going to be. I can't explain everything yet. Can I come stay with you for a while? She didn't hesitate, of course. My guest room's yours. Do you need me to come get you? The question caught me off guard. Part of me wanted to say yes, to be rescued, but I shook my head even though she couldn't see it. Not yet. I need to make sure Michael's taken care of first. We talked for another 15 minutes, her filling the silence with small updates, her new job, the vegetable garden she'd started. I realized how much I'd missed hearing her voice, how small my world had become. That evening, I went online and started researching in-home care services. If I was leaving, I wasn't going to walk out and leave him stranded. He'd get the care he needed, just not from me. Over the next week, I made calls in the afternoons when he napped. I found an agency, explained the situation in vague terms, and arranged for someone to come by for an assessment. I also started quietly selling things online, a set of vintage dishes, a necklace I hadn't worn in years, even a few of Michael's old tools he hadn't touched since the accident. Every dollar went into a new bank account he didn't know about. For years, I'd lived like my life was tethered to his wheelchair. But now, with every step I took toward leaving, I felt the chain loosen. I wasn't just planning an escape. I was planning a beginning. One last gift the agency's care coordinator came on a Thursday afternoon. Michael was dozing in his recliner, the sunlight pooling across his blanket like honey. I'd told him earlier we had a visitor coming to talk about some household help. He hadn't argued. If anything, he looked mildly relieved. Her name was Dana, a brisk but kind woman in her 50s who clearly had seen every kind of family situation. She spoke directly to Michael, asking about his daily routine, the medications, the challenges he faced. He didn't mention me much, just my wife helps with that, or Claire takes care of it. Not once did he say thank you. After she left, I went into the kitchen and brewed him his favorite coffee. The rich smell filled the air, reminding me of the early years when I'd make 2 cups and we'd sit on the porch together. I carried it in to him. Here, I said softly. He looked surprised. What's this for? Just because. He took a sip, and for a brief moment, his eyes softened. The man I married flickered through. But then it was gone, replaced by the same distant tiredness that had lived there for years. That night, after he went to bed, I packed the last of my things, the photo of my parents, the leather-bound journal Karen had given me, the tiny carved bird Michael had bought me during our honeymoon in Maine. I slipped a letter into the drawer of his nightstand. It wasn't a goodbye filled with bitterness or blame, just a quiet truth. Michael, I have loved you in ways I can't explain. I've cared for you because it was right, because I made a promise. But I've lost myself, and I need to find her again. I've arranged for someone to be here tomorrow to help you. You'll be cared for. Please know this isn't about leaving you behind. It's about finally returning to me. Claire. I lay in bed beside him that night, listening to the rise and fall of his breathing, memorizing the rhythm. It wasn't love anymore, but it was history. And history still had weight. By morning, I'd be gone. The road out, the morning light spilled across the bedroom like it had for 2 decades. Warm, golden, indifferent. Michael was still asleep when I slipped out from under the covers. My suitcase was by the door, the wheels quiet on the hardwood. I paused at his side, watching his chest rise and fall. His hair had gone almost entirely silver, the lines around his mouth deeper, but his face was peaceful in sleep. I thought about the mornings when I used to kiss his cheek before making breakfast. The mornings when hope still lived here. Not today. I wheeled my bag into the living room and opened the front door. The air outside was cool, a whisper of early autumn. My car sat in the driveway, already packed. Karen was meeting me at her cabin upstate. I put the suitcase in the trunk, my hands trembling, not with guilt, but with the surreal weight of finally moving. I was about to get into the car. When I heard it, the faint sound of my name, Claire, I turned. Michael was in his wheelchair in the doorway, his blanket around his shoulders. He must have woken as I left. His face was pale, his eyes holding something I hadn't seen in years. Not pity, not need. Something like fear. You're leaving? His voice cracked out, my throat tightened. Michael, I left you a letter. I don't want a letter. He wheeled forward, his hands shaking on the rims. I didn't think you'd actually. I stepped toward him, every part of me torn between the instinct to comfort and the need to walk away. You'll have care, Michael. You'll be safe. His eyes searched mine. But will you? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't a threat, it was a truth I hadn't faced. Leaving didn't guarantee freedom. The years I'd given him had shaped me, and I wasn't sure I knew who I was without them. I put my hand on his shoulder, one last connection. I have to try. Then I turned, got into the car, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller until it was gone. But his voice saying my name followed me like a shadow. The cabin's silence, the gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled up to Curran's cabin. It was tucked between tall pines, their branches swaying gently in the mountain breeze. The air here was thinner, cooler, cleaner somehow. I stepped out of the car and took the deepest breath I'd taken in years. Curran came out to greet me, wrapping me in a hug so tight it felt like she was trying to squeeze the 20 years of my life back into me. You did it, she whispered. You're here. Inside, the cabin was cozy, warm wood walls, the smell of coffee lingering in the air. My bag was barely inside the door when Karen handed me a mug. Drink. You need to warm up. I sank into the couch, letting my shoulders drop for what felt like the first time in decades. But the quiet here, it wasn't the peaceful quiet I dreamed about. It was too empty, too sudden. I had thought leaving would feel like stepping into sunlight after a long night, but instead, it felt like stepping into a room where the walls were still closing in, only slower. Curran noticed. You're shaking. I'm fine, I lied. But the truth was, every creak of the cabin made me think of Michael calling for me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face in the doorway. That night, after Karen went to bed, I sat by the small fireplace and stared into the flames. My phone was on the table beside me, silent. Part of me wanted to smash it to pieces. Part of me wanted it to ring. I had imagined freedom as a clean break, but I was starting to realize something. You can walk away from a house, from a man, from 2 decades of caretaking, but you can't just walk away from the version of yourself that lived there. The fire cracked, and I whispered to no one, whom I know. The cabin didn't answer. The door I chose the next morning. Sunlight poured through the cabin windows, turning the wooden walls golden. Karen was already outside, chopping firewood like it was nothing. I stood in the doorway, coffee warming my hands, watching her breathe in the crisp mountain air as if she owned it. I envied that ease, but then my phone buzzed. One missed call, Michael's sister. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I stared at the phone until my pulse steadied. When the buzzing stopped, I put it in the drawer. Corinne came back inside, sweat glistening on her forehead. You okay? I nodded, but I wasn't sure if I was lying. We spent the day wandering the trails behind the cabin. I listened to the crunch of pine needles under my boots, the rush of a distant creek, the quiet murmur of wind between the branches. Every sound reminded me that life was still out there, that mine wasn't over. That night, I sat on the porch alone. The stars spilled across the black sky, and for the first time in years, I realized I could see all of them. No city haze, no blinds drawn against the world. And in that moment, I knew I wouldn't go back. Not because I didn't care about Michael anymore, but because going back would mean erasing the part of me that had fought so hard to get here. I whispered into the cold night, I'm not your caretaker anymore. I'm me. The words felt strange, but they settled in my chest like they belonged there. When I finally went inside, Corinne was waiting. She looked at me, really looked at me, and smiled. You chose. I did, I said. And this time I chose myself. The cabin was still silent, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like the beginning